That means if I push the button.
Asking the relevant question.
Nothing, yeah. As soon as I start the PowerPoint, though, you'll be able to.
Everybody said that's what your purpose was.
Well, if it keeps being this warm, maybe we'll have a call.
Yeah, Amherst has their course open. Yeah, you're just not allowed to go on the greens. Shoot a cone right next to them. I'm surprised how many people still do it.
It's amazing.
Those ranges are yucky part anyway.
It's okay, 6 o'clock, it's already good now.
Yeah.
What we got for recess, we are in our select board meeting. I'm trying to award it to our fellow select board members, Bill Kennedy, Bill Taylor, town administrator McStay is here with our assistant to the town administrator, Ellie Kreutz. Lily Gilligan, finance director, has joined us, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to budget committee chairman Carl Mazzino.
Thank you, Tyler. Let me introduce the members of the Budget Committee. We have sitting in the front row here, Mandy Sliver and Ronnie McIntyre. And then coming down the table here, we have Donnie Parkhurst, Mary Clark, Al Lenos, Rich Lesser. I'm Carl Mazzino. And I think the rest of them, oh, and sorry, you weren't introduced by the person sitting next to you, but that's our last member, Leslie Davis. To begin, I'd just like to do a couple of very quick business items for the Budget Committee. We had a couple of meetings this summer. People may not be aware that the Budget Committee ever meets on its own, but we did do a couple of things this summer. There were public meetings announced as such. And we also had a joint meeting with the CIP, as we did the previous year. We have not approved the minutes of our last of those meetings, which was on June 15th. So I'd like to hear a motion from a Budget Committee to approve those minutes.
I'd like to make that motion to approve.
Thank you. We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The other thing to mention is that we looked at the charter for the Budget Committee, which is in the town ordinances. It does not describe what the Budget Committee is supposed to do anymore. It's completely out of date. And we have drafted a new version, which will eventually, if we can come to some agreement on it, go before the town meeting for approval. So I just speaking to the Budget Committee members, you have seen the draft, you've seen a revision of the draft. I'm not asking for approval tonight, I'm just asking if you have anything further that you want to amend in that draft, please send it to the rest of us. And that takes care of the exclusive business of the Budget Committee. Yeah.
One question. Was the possibility of abolishing the budget committee brought up in that meeting?
Not by the Budget Committee.
Are you ready to go?
I've sat in on several budget committee seasons over the years, and
Is this a public document that's available?
It is not at the moment. I'm not sure if it should be at this point. I suppose it should.
It will ultimately have to be part of the draft warrant, so
Sure.
it'll come to the select board.
It'll certainly come at that point, yeah.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable sharing a copy of this.
I'll send it to the select board, yeah, sure.
Tyler, why did you feel, we should discuss maybe abolishing the budget committee, feel we're kind of, what are the arguments for abolishing it?
I've witnessed very capable town administration over the years putting together budgets with their department heads that always seem to be right on the mark. And we're up here, we'll ask many questions, and I've heard the same questions from some people over the years, saying maybe arguments without solutions that haven't moved the budgets really much. So I was just wondering that out loud. What is the benefit of having a meeting every week for an entire month with several people and all this preparation when we have an incredible staff here that does budgets for years. They always pass. I don't know.
Mindy?
Can I have an answer?
Sure.
I think it's wonderful that we have had very good luck in the past and that we do have great staff and great administration right now. Having this process in place ensures that if that staff changes and if that administration changes, we have a process in place to make sure that we have oversight.
And I think we owe it to our citizens of the town to have that oversight.
Okay, as long as it's not just performative and going through the motions. Yeah.
Just makes our job easy that it's always so good.
This is true.
Yeah, I agree that there's a usefulness to it, but I would add that the public perception of the process is an important part of it. I think that people at town meeting often do ask questions of budget committee members during the town meeting, and I think that it sounds like an independent voice, and it absolutely is an independent voice. The budget committee is elected and it is unpaid, so there's no conflict of interest issue there. So I think it's a reasonable question to ask, though. And we should reflect upon that as we look at what the responsibilities we're suggesting for the budget committee. With that, I think we'd like to hear the report from the CRP.
Thank you. I'm Leandra Johnson McDonald. I was chair of the CIP this year, and this is my vice chair.
Sarah Steinberg Keller.
And when you think about process, the CIP is only allowed by the state if we have a master plan, so I thank the planning board for that. And if allowed by the legislative body. And its only function is to assist the budget committee and the selectmen with the budget in the sense that we look forward rather than just at the single year. So that's our job. This was our committee. By law, we have to have a couple of planning board members, so that's why they are delineated for the record. And I'd like to thank all the members who worked really hard, and especially thank the staff, which, as you say, is a very highly functioning staff, bringing us really good projects, and especially Danica, who's here, and Lily, who made a lot more things clear to us than we have known in the past. So, and I'll go on to the next slide and let Sarah talk.
So as you know, a CIP plan, the CIP looks at the expenses above $10,000 that are capital in nature. We meet with all the department heads with requests, look at the overall schedule of projects, and make recommendations of sequencing and financing. We are recommending that you accept the department requests in these slides that follow. We are also recommending that the town plan to use fewer bonds and fund capital reserve accounts instead as we go forward.
We have some graphic representations here of, this is of the current bond payments on the left, with the purple line, the total of warrant articles and bonds, and the black line, the total of all bonds. And on the right is the projected tax rate over the 7-year period as we pay off these bonds. You'll note it, at the moment it's $1.28, and by fiscal 2030 it would be 71 cents. So this is sort of a graphic way to look at it. Another way to look at it is to look at the bond repayment from taxes. And you can see this is all of the current bonds paid from taxes, and I thank Carl and Lily for this slide. And you can see what is happening if we pay off these bonds. This is the principal outstanding, including all the bonds, even the ones who are being paid off from TIF accounts.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is not all the bonds. This is
The principal.
No, it doesn't refer to all the bonds. It refers to the 3 that are marked on the right there, plus the ones in the previous slide. So the water and sewer bonds are not in here.
Right, and it says that on the slide, thank you. Yeah, these are all of our outstandings funded by regular tax rate bonds, if you want me to be specific. And this is principal outstanding rather than principal. Within our report, a request for new capital reserve funds for bridges, dams and culverts, and a couple from the rec department, one for equipment and one for pool capital costs. But we further suggest that all departments start looking at such things and anticipating similar costs. And we also hope that you'll continue what you've been doing of using the fund balances to either reduce the tax rate or maybe to fund some of these capital reserve accounts.
So this is a summary slide of the capital reserve requests, plus a summary line of CIP general fund requests, with a final line giving the tax rate impact. Detailed info is going to come on the following slides.
And this is our list of bonds and a current 8-year projection of repayment and tax rate impact. The last line sums the bonds in the warrant article requests. The tax rate effect does not include bonds funded by other sources like TIFs.
And this slide shows general fund requests, the ongoing IT equipment, the 5-year maintenance schedule of tennis courts and basketball court, and the painting of Kai Sage House, and the highway department's paving and sidewalk requests. And note that the last year's line item for cruisers will now be a capital reserve request. Also, note that the Kai Sage House, that's provided for by the 1833 Society.
We now head into the individual slides covered in the early summary, plus balance and other funds not listed above. This is the first, is the water and sewer set of enterprise funds. You'll see in later slides that these funds will replace current capital reserve funds for water and sewer. This is the South Peterborough TIF, though it just says TIF, it's the South Peterborough TIF. And we have a number of proposals for funding improvements in that district that have come to us from the highway department. So this is obviously not something that we decide, it gets decided by the TIF and the EDA and comes to us. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, the police department plans to request a capital reserve fund going forward. In the past, if there is a problem getting a vehicle or something like that, that money has to go into the fund balance and can't be held over to next year. So by having a capital reserve, if they have a situation that occurs, they can do something about it.
This is the fire department's capital reserve fund for apparatus and equipment. You will note that toward the end of the 6-year cycle, the balance is increasing by 10 plus, by year 10 plus, that will accumulate to cover the cost of a new ladder truck.
You know what this is? This is our ARPA funds that we sequestered to use for the fire department, no longer municipal facilities campus. I guess we're saying fire department, but that was what the slide said.
And the winter operations expendable trust does not come before us, before the CIP. It's less than 10,000.
And this is highways, regular scheduled vehicle replacement, capital reserve fund. And as you can see, there's just a pretty steady progression of things that they are asking for.
And this is the roadway upgrade capital reserve fund, but take note that this plan is, as it's scheduled so far, is set to terminate in 2028 as it was a projected 10-year project.
hit push the button, it doesn't always go. This is a new capital reserve fund being proposed for bridges, dams, and culvert replacement. You notice some big downtown infrastructure on here, Grove Street, Elm Street, and also the possible Pine Street culvert in fiscal '28. So this is a new capital reserve fund.
No requests from this fund that came before us this year.
As everybody knows, this is the reclamations fund, also funded out of our license, our motor vehicle fees. The big thing this year is they're planning to put in a dry storage facility behind the building, and obviously this does not come from taxes.
This is the landfill pollution abatement fund. This expenditure does not come before CIP, but it may in the future if there's a need for ongoing monitoring.
Because the funding source
Disappears.
disappears, right. This is the Fred and Betty Fry garden. Obviously, this doesn't come before us either because it's smaller amounts. This is Sewer Department Capital Reserve Fund, which, as I said before, we are terminating at the end of this year. And this is the Sewer Department. This is the Water Department Fund, which will go through this year and then terminate into the Capital Reserve Fund. I should say Enterprise Fund, sorry.
And then this is the Recreations Capital Reserve Fund for vehicle and heavy equipment that is being proposed for a warrant article this coming year. This is a capital reserve to balance out the Adams Pool maintenance cost. And then we're looking at the Isabel Miller Fund. The Recreation Department plans to spend money in FY '25 towards the community center gymnasium.
And this is our normal GIS mapping flyover we do every 6 years. This is a capital reserve fund we've had for a while to fund that, and then the planner map work they have to do after it.
And then this is the Cemetery Expendable Trust. This expenditure was not reviewed by CIP.
And this is titled Ambulance Revolving Fund, but it's really a graph, the total expenses that the ambulance fund is anticipating. Not all of this comes out of Peterborough. Some of this is from the other towns that use the ambulance fund, and it is related, but not the capital, the addition to the revolving fund that's asked for in the main set of expenditures. I still have trouble pressing this button. And this is our recap. As you said, we recommend that the department requests as summarized in the preceding tables be accepted. We recommend restructuring the capital budget to utilize capital reserve funds and to replace bonding. And we hope that departments will be able to have a smoother curve and multi-year flexibility. And that new fund, number 3, capital reserve fund for the bridges, culverts, and dams. And then we further think that, like the Recreation Department, other town departments should consider capital reserve funds for the maintenance of buildings and grounds going forward. And then again, we hope you'll decide to use the fund balance to smooth out some of these expenses. The one thing I would say is that by transitioning to capital reserve funds at a time that we're still paying off bonds, we will have an increase in the tax rate for about 4 or 5 years, at which point we will begin to make progress, and we'll have to do this at some time if that's the approach we want to take. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's about it.
We'll be glad to take questions. We may even have some of the answers.
Could I just do a clarification? If you could go back to the graph of the principal remaining on bonds, if you could recognize that.
Yeah, I think it's number 7.
Yes, that one. The reason that the selection of bonds to include is the ones that aren't included here. It doesn't include water and sewer, but it does include those 3 that are not paid by taxpayers. The reason that particular set was chosen is because this is the basis for deciding what the legal allowance for bonding will be in the town. So as we understand, we got close to the limit when we made our previous plans for funding the fire station, and so this helps you to understand how much is left. So right now, we have something in the order of 12 million, I think it is, beyond current levels. That takes account of the reserve that the select board has suggested they want to maintain. And you can see how quickly this goes down. It's a little bit hard to see the years, but each of those tick marks down there is a year. So in just a couple of years, there'll be quite a bit less principal outstanding, and that means even if the total amount of property taxes will remain stable, you would have more and more bonding capacity, and the bonding capacity increases pretty quickly. So that's the point of including this particular set of thing. Billy, do you want to
No, you said it great.
clarify that? Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah, that's it.
This doesn't include the bond we're already pretty much committed to for the firehouse, right?
We aren't committed to any bond for the firehouse.
Well,
Except for, well, we have one that we've already
Right,
taken
but-
out.
but-
But beyond that, we haven't committed to anything.
I understand we haven't voted on it, but, we don't have a capital reserve for the fire department. So, it'd be great to see a projection of future projects that are kind of in the offing that could impact these slides. Because I get what you're saying, I'm not saying we should vote on it tonight, but I think realistically, you're gonna see another, I don't know what the select board will commit to, but say even 10 million more on that line next year, the year after, than we're seeing here. So I think it's a little.
When we had our joint meeting between the Budget Committee and the CIP, the question was asked of what other bonds are forthcoming. And the answer given from the town was, there are no other bonds except for the fire station. So the fire station is the only bond that's in the works in the mind of
Right,
the
that's
town
why that's
administration.
exactly what I said. I'd
But
love
since
to
we have
see a
no
slide
idea-
that includes that.
Excuse me, Carl, if I could interrupt you.
Oh, let me finish, please.
Sure.
So, we don't know how much the fire station bond would be. We expect there would be one, but we really have no idea. We might have some idea of how much it costs to do a fire station, but since there are various forms of income that might be put towards that, we can't make any estimate, and the chief did not make any estimate, the town doesn't make any estimate, so I don't think the budget committee is in a position to make any estimate.
So basically
Well,
what
listen, we're
I,
not talking about the budget committee, we're talking about CIP.
yes, and could I answer
Yes.
that question?
Thank you.
I think the problem is, if something does not come before us, we can't make a decision on it. We don't go to the departments and say, give us a number when they don't have a number. And we discussed having a placeholder, but we would be making up a number which we thought would do a disservice. It's not as though anyone in this room doesn't know what's coming. So what we try to do is refine the numbers that we have and give you our best possible projection of what's going to happen, and what's added on is going to be added on.
And knowing that that's going to be added on, I think it was also about really taking on the whole new approach of not bonding everything
Yeah.
and starting. So it was like also a process shift. So of course we all know, but it's also adapting to a new system. Or
There will be
way of doing
extensive
things.
discussions, obviously, once we do have a number, then CIP next year will be looking at that very closely, obviously, but it comes up by that time.
Ronnie?
I just want to know if these charts and tables that we viewed, are they available online? Will they be posted online?
They will be posted to the Budget Committee's page tomorrow.
Thank you.
There is a slide that shows the fire department capital reserve. I forget what it
Equipment.
was. Fire, was that it?
For equipment.
Not for
and-
equipment, way in the
Way past-
beginning, for the whole fire station. 155.
That was for the initial 350,000 that was already.
Oh,
Yeah,
is
there's
that
a
what that
couple
is?
of, let's just look at it, if I can get up there. I'm going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Somebody tell me
We're
that.
not capital reserving.
Nope,
You just
passed it again.
That it? That was it?
No, no.
That's it, fire station right there. That's,
Right.
all right.
That is
That's-
not it, that is the bond
That is the
cost.
plan.
Leandra, go forward in your
Remember the $2
presentation.
million,
Yes,
up to $2
okay.
million, that's that with a quick repayment.
Stop, that's what he's talking about.
Right, that's the two, was it 2.5, was it?
Well, that's
Right.
the $350,000 that was received from ARPA funds.
Right, that's a
that-
different
That
thing,
town
yeah.
meeting voted into the expendable trust fund at last town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We have another $350,082 to vote in again, or to use, oh, that's right, it's offsetting that bond. Yes, it's the bond offset, sorry.
Okay, so there's no
That
capital
was built
reserve.
in.
Sorry.
There's no additional capital reserve for the fire station.
Exactly.
This
Okay.
is it, and CIP committee does not have a plan to add more money into it just yet.
No. We don't have any plan to expend it yet, so. So the other fire department thing
There you go.
is, if you look at the these are all bonds except for, but if you look at this one, the big changes here is if you look at fiscal '24, the second line down for fire department, the apparatus fund has gone up from 100,000 to 275 as a request, 375, 275 more. And you also, if you look down a little lower, we now are having a regular line item in here for the ambulance revolving fund, which, as you know, when we have voted in money from various sources in previous years, this is not technically, to my mind, a purely capital expense, but it has to go somewhere, so apparently this is where it goes. But that includes employees as well as equipment that the revolving fund is spent on. Those are the two, a big change that's in there. And then the other one is the $500,000 line about the sixth one down for the bridges and culverts. So that pushes the capital reserves and up from 1,159 in fiscal '23 to 2,162 in fiscal '24. And that holds pretty even going forward based on capital reserves. So that's a big change.
Another question.
One of the line items on one of these slides, were capital reserve fund for the culverts. You were suggesting a
This
new
one, yeah.
fund. I noticed that pushed off the Pine Street culvert until '28. Did you notice that?
The information I got from Seth, or we got from Seth, was that they don't really have in order to get the engineering and the plan and everything together, that's where they put it. Obviously, they could swap it in earlier if it became essential, but we won't have enough money to fund it until a further out year, and we have that sinkhole in the Elm Street Bridge, and I don't know exactly what they're planning on the Grove Street Bridge, but that's in there, so.
Well, I have a vested interest in the renovations in Pine Street.
I think it should be high priority.
I'd say Seth made quite a considerable presentation on this, and it's not a matter of priorities, it's a matter of the process of land, getting land rights and so on because of the problems associated with that particular culvert project. So I would suggest this is a good thing to bring up again directly with
I'll talk with Seth.
well, I
And
think it
Seth
should be
will
brought
be
up
here.
at the
Yeah.
Seth will be
Seth
here
will-
next week,
Yeah.
and he'll be able to
That
talk
target
more about
keeps
it.
moving.
It's not a prioritization issue, it's
It's a funding
much more
issue
substantial.
and engineering, there's a lot involved in that.
There's a lot of moving parts. in
To that particular culvert especially, yeah.
Yeah.
And as Leandra said in the initial presentation, a large part of the recommendation to switch over to more of these revolving funds and capital reserves is to smooth out the expenditures. So when you see things climbing Over time, it's largely because the expectation is that the costs will go up. So that's why when you have a long timetable like that, you're going to see it go up.
So what is the, enlighten me, what is the mechanism for expenditure of capital reserve funds? Do we need to go to the legislature, or do we go through?
We just did it earlier today.
Okay.
So at the selectmen's meeting.
So we
it's a
can
vote.
do it as, so
It gives us-
benefit is
That's the whole
when it's
flexibility
needed.
thing.
You're controlling it.
And a non-lapsing appropriation, if for some reason it isn't done, the money's still there to do it the next fiscal year.
Because we were struggling on the Energy Committee about the use of funds for EVs, because a lot of these EVs, you have to sign up for them a year ahead of time or more.
That's one of the reasons that police chief is going to a capital reserve fund, because, you know, if he can't buy a cruiser or, you know,
Right.
something happens, he can still push it off.
Our ambulance orders are a year out.
Yeah, exactly.
Our regular truck orders are, you know, also getting up to a year out. So it's not uncommon at all. And we do occasionally run into an issue where something that we've sought to purchase, you know, we don't have quite enough saved up for it anymore, which is where we've been able to draw on those capital reserve funds like we did earlier this evening.
So that's a real benefit.
Yep.
So, any other questions?
So I wholeheartedly agree with this idea. I'm really psyched, and I don't have a problem with the huge increase, or I didn't see an actual percent increase on any of these slides total. But I wonder, having been on CIP and us sort of self-editing on some of these appropriations because of overall budget concerns, how you feel about, like, how much you're putting, or how much CIP is putting aside for each of these funds. Like, for instance, the Adams Pool, like, I don't know what shape the Adams Pool is in, but it seems to me that 15 grand is not enough. If something big happens, you're not appropriating enough for something like that. Or like for the bridge, for the road project, I get that it was meant to be a 10-year project, but you can't tell me that at the end of 10 years, you're not, you know, we can't look around and say that 5 years after that, something will be needed, and, you know, maybe that should just, you know, whether it's 400,000 or you drop it to 250 or something, if you just end the fund, that means we have to start the fund again in, what, 10 years or something? So I'm concerned that that isn't being funded, because the roads will fail again. It's not.
Well, luckily,
Can you mind if I answer that?
Yeah.
That's part of the regular public works budget. The 400 and whatever it is a year is to upgrade the roads in general, so that they're at a percentage level that can be maintained out of the
I
public
totally
works.
get what the fund is for. I just wonder why we just stop it as if the roads will never, ever need to be repaired.
I
They're
believe, since
funded
it,
out of the public works.
I think that it was voted as presented as a 10-year plan. So if Public Works wished to have a 15-year plan, I'm assuming that would come before.
I'm not disputing any of that, it concerns me that,
What my feeling was, I have similar concerns. What my feeling was it's set to terminate in '28, and I figured that it would be something that we would probably alter the course of, and we sort of worded it that way in the presentation, because I do think it's something that we need to discuss a lot more, but I think that it was just sort of not the hill to die on this year, but maybe it should have been, but you know what I mean?
you've got a couple years before you have to
Right.
worry that you're not funding it out. I'm just saying that it seems odd.
Let me make a comment on the process here. Tyler mentioned earlier what the quality of the staff we have in the town. These numbers did not come from the CIP. These numbers came from the staff. Seth set up a system for road repair, and as Bill just mentioned, the purpose of his system was to improve the quality so that the maintenance level required to keep roads adequate would fit with the annual number that we would like to be spending. And so the idea that we don't have the right number is to argue with the people who actually work with these numbers and know them best. I mean, I could speculate that it's not enough, but I have no basis for saying that, whereas Seth and his team do have a basis for saying what the number is, and they're the ones who generated these numbers. Now, Seth will be coming before us, and he will have his team with him, and we can, in the Budget Committee joint meetings, discuss it further. But I think that the numbers that we have up here are the ones the CIP is endorsing because they have been convinced by the presentation coming from the town.
I just had a question. I'm not accusing anybody of anything.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Tom?
That's exactly what you said.
You had another question?
No, I think I'll table it. Seems like people have had enough of me.
No, please, speak up.
You sure?
Listen.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
If it comes to.
Mary?
Ask it.
Mary?
I
So
would
that we know.
make sure,
We'll come back.
okay. This may not be the question to ask at this point in time, but as a brand-new member of the Budget Committee, how are the potential funding sources factored in to these numbers, specifically state and federal funding?
We don't make any assumptions of what we will get from other political entities unless they're in hand.
It's very safe not to. You never know.
On the other hand, this is just
So you're
recommend,
assuming zero at this point?
right, but we don't know. But the recommendations we make as to being a capital reserve or not, or being bonding or not, that's your decision. That's just a recommendation on our part for leveling it out.
Lily, would you like to add?
We do have state money that was awarded through legislative action this year, and the selectmen accepted it 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, but that's, it was slightly, that's money in hand, it's not, right?
Exactly, but it's almost $238,000, which would be an excellent, and it's for bridge works specifically. It would be an excellent source of money to start that new bridge, culvert, and dam capital reserve fund with. That we are recommending the initial amount of money to be placed in there to be $500,000. So you're almost halfway there with that influx of cash from the state that is specific for bridge work.
Thank you.
Was that money, what was accepted at the meeting to use it for
Yeah,
that?
it has to be used towards bridge. It is bridge aid money, so it can only be used towards bridges.
But there would be, I would expect no other cash to be coming from the state to support
Not that
those
we're
funds.
aware of anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the CIP?
If I could just make a comment, just to underline what was driving the CIP decisions is basically the era of cheap money for bonding is gone. And we realize that, in the 1-2% bonds for 30 years, those aren't happening anymore, and these 5-6%, whatever they may be going forward. We thought this was really an important time to look at starting to self-fund a lot of these expenses rather than depending on paying these exorbitant interest rates going forward. In the long run, hopefully that's going to save the town lots of money as well. So I just wanted to underscore that point.
Thank you for the support.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, and Sarah, great job putting that together. Thank you again.
And that ran with those ladies. Well, I've only been on the committee 25 years, and I'd say this is, a great leap forward to be thinking this way.
Have we integrated all of these numbers that we're talking about in terms of capital reserve funds into the current budget?
Yes, all of the CIP items that are hitting general fund are in your general fund expenditure budget. Everything else is in capital reserve fund budgets where warrant articles will be written to support those requests for 2024.
So
There's very few CIP items that are in the budget. It's the recreation resurfacing, the IT items, and Kai Sage.
Kai Sage.
That's it.
That's it.
Everything else is capital reserve funding.
And it will affect our tax rate, certainly not this current fiscal year, but next fiscal year.
There will be an impact on tax rate if you fund all of these projects,
Right.
yes.
So if the legislature funds all these projects,
There would be a $1 million increase to capital reserve
Yep.
funding.
right, and that will affect our tax rate.
What was it, roughly $1.08 or something? From $1.92 to $3.08, I think is the number for year to year.
If they are entirely funded
307.
through.
Yeah. And it would actually be less because of the 237
Right.
that I just mentioned. So it'd be about a $750,000 increase.
And any amount that's voted out of fund balance to offset them will again reduce
Exactly.
that.
That increase could be fully supported with fund balance.
But
And
we
so,
don't make those decisions until November.
well, no,
When you-
you'll make that decision in probably February or March. So that, because there's two ways that you can use, well, there's technically three ways you can use fund balance.
Let's not talk about that.
Let's not talk about the third way.
We're not going to use that anymore.
But the two ways that you can use fund balance is select board vote to offset the tax rate in fall, or town meeting vote to raise and appropriate money out of the fund balance to fund items, including funding capital reserve or expendable trust funds. So that's something that Lily and I have talked about quite a bit, is that we would like to really use fund balance, which we have quite a bit of right now, to help support this program, really get it up and off the ground with some seed money, and hopefully not hit the tax rate to the extent that it would otherwise. Makes it a lot easier for people to vote in favor of saving money. It doesn't have a direct impact.
Okay.
Nicole, are you going with the presentation on the next section?
Yes, so, you've all received your budgets, the draft budget, and for those of you who didn't get it directly by email from me, you can go to the town's website under Budget Committee or under the calendar item for tonight's meeting. You can find a link to all of those documents, which includes the expenditure budget, and then the two revenue sides. So one for general fund revenues that go to offset tax dollars, and the other for the water, sewer, revolving fund, those other budget revenues. I also sent out a memo that goes along with that, and I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, sorry folks, you're just going to have to listen to me talk. But it essentially covered a few items. The budget environment and philosophy that we went into this budget process with, the changes that we are making to how the budget is being presented this year, and then the budget-wide impacts. So in terms of the environment and the philosophy, this past year, we started the budget process in a time of high inflation, which I think everyone knows about, and we don't need to dwell on too deeply. But the cost of everything has really gone up. Much of that is related to energy costs and then the knock-on effects of having a higher energy cost, because not only does it increase our direct costs in terms of energy, but it also increases the cost that vendors have to charge us for the products that we are buying from them. So everything has gone up accordingly. This year, we did get grants from the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act of 2021. Some of that includes the bridge aid money that Lily was just talking about. Another piece of that is $164,500 that goes to the highway block grant. It's an increase to the road maintenance funds. Thanks to that money, that's really helped us to essentially insulate our operations this year. So the biggest drivers, of course, of the increase this year have been largely diesel-related expenses. With that additional money in the highway department, we won't have to cut back any projects that we had planned for this year. But having said that, we're not expecting any grants in the upcoming year. So we're not looking at any offsets to any increases. So you're going to see a lot of the increase in the budget are related to those energy costs, one way or another. Another big cost center for us is, of course, our personnel costs. Over half our budget, almost 60% of the town's operating budget is driven by staff, through salaries, of course, but also health insurance, payroll taxes, and so on, retirement, et cetera. We've looked very closely at the local communities to see what are they planning in their budgets for their staff increases. We've looked at the Northeastern CPI. We've looked at the COLA that Social Security is giving to Social Security recipients. Those increases have all gone, anywhere between 6 to 8.7% as we enter this budget process, and then so in consultation with the select board at their retreat, we also started this budget process with an 8.7 increase to salaries across the board. That's going to do two things. One, it helps us retain the staff that we have, and we have an excellent staff. I don't think anyone can question the quality of the staff that we have here. But it also helps us to essentially insulate us for having to make some salary adjustments, which we know we have to make in some of these positions around town. It's become an incredibly competitive market. We have folks that work here who, like I said, are very high-quality staff. We really want to keep them, but there are towns that are offering a lot more money than what we are paying some of these folks. So we might need to make some changes. If we are able to retain this 8.7% in total within the budget, that'll give us enough money once we've conducted a thorough salary survey to make those adjustments as needed. So, as far as philosophy goes, I asked the department directors to bring me in a well-thought-out budget that funds the services that we are currently providing to the community. These are the services that the select board and town meeting have over the years developed that our residents depend upon, and so we are not recommending any significant changes to them. There are a couple of add-ons to the services that we provide that we don't have before that are going to be discussed in this budget as we go forward, but most of those are very small. What we were talking about are relatively minor increases to the level of work that we already do. They have also asked Lily and Tanya, and the finance department did an amazing job analyzing our current expenditures, really got down to the nitty-gritty of what are we at, not just looking at what we budgeted in the past, but what have we actually used in the past out of each of these lines. Looked very closely at projections based on the first few years of the first few months of this year's budget. To really get a handle on exactly what we are spending in each of these lines so that we can make really good recommendations to you. Changes to the budget presentation. We have over the last few years been making a number of overhauls to how the budget's being presented. The last two are now public works. We've consolidated buildings and grounds, highway, parks, and cemeteries into a single general services segment of the public works budget. This reflects how we actually operate public works. It makes an awful lot more sense. Superintendent Tim Rose oversees the general services subdivision of the Public Works Department. He does a great job. We've also changed some allocations into the Public Works Administration budget. You see that mostly in the staffing. So if you look at the staffing costs, it's not actually increased costs in staffing to the town. It's moving staff into the Public Works Administration budget from other budgets where it had been divvied out before. Also in the ambulance service, we removed the artificial distinction that we have within the ambulance service between the 911 and the transfers, because it really was only put there in 2015 to help other communities understand exactly how much of the ambulance budget was going towards operating the 911 costs and how much of it was, being used to transfer patients between one hospital and another. But it's the same ambulances, it's the same people in the ambulances, we're using the same equipment, we're using the same supplies. After a number of years, I think all the other communities are comfortable with how we operate and how we build them for the operations. We're still able to track that by using the actual run numbers. So, being able to break down what we're charging out to the communities versus what is actually interfacility transfers is still very easy. But this really makes the budgeting a lot more intuitive. And then budget-wide impacts. So the majority of the increases to the budget can be traced back directly to personnel. And again, we looked at the Northeast CPI, we looked at Social Security's COLA adjustments, we looked at other towns, and we budgeted 5% for COLA and 3.7% for merit increases in every salary line. Our health and dental insurance increases are beginning July 1st. That is 6% to health, 6.6% increase to health, and a 1.6% increase to dental. Pension system contributions actually went down a little bit, which is remarkable. We're pretty excited about that. And I get into a little bit of detail on that there, but it was nice to see that actually decrease a little bit. Electricity jumped And while electricity jumped, you're not going to see a whole lot of increases to electricity and across the entire budget, because we were very proactive last year when we knew that electricity prices were going to go up. In last year's budget, we had a pretty big escalator, and that is holding pretty steady. So we're pretty happy with that. However, again, there's that knock-on effect. Electricity may not go up as far as our budget is concerned, but the cost of goods coming to us have increased in part because of the cost of utilities. Diesel, gasoline, and heating fuels, on the other hand, those have gone up, and we did not have those built into their current year budget, so you're going to see pretty dramatic increases. The average across all of the budget lines for all of those fuel types is 33% increase. So, any questions on my synopsis of the budget?
Nicole, can you put a dollar amount on that pension contribution that we're saving, roughly? Do you know how much that is?
No, I didn't.
How significant that is?
Well, kind of, sort of.
That'll be laid out in the police department budget tomorrow.
It's, a lot of it you'll see, well, the thing is that we also added some full-time positions into the budget. So, yes, the contribution on a per employee basis went down, however, overall budgeted contributions are gonna go up because of those additional. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. All right.
I do.
We all want to open our hymnals to administration. I can get started.
Let's do it.
All right, executive administration, these are my budgets, so they're not terribly exciting. You'll see that the salary line, executive administration, goes down just a little bit. That is due to, as I said, moving salaries more firmly into public works. So we moved some salaries that had been budgeted into executive administration into the public works side. And then you'll see those reductions reflected also in payroll taxes and retirement. Other than that, pretty steady. We level funded more or less everything else. Legal fees, I have not been warned of any increases from town council, so I am not budgeting for any increases from town council. I'm really hoping that we stick with that. $60,000, which is our regular retainer, plus $75,000 for any incidental filing fees or what have you. Human services budget, last year we moved all of that salary, payroll taxes and whatnot into executive administration. Eventually you're going to see all of those figures fall off. So as we move down into human services operations, Ally's doing a really great job taking over human services, but we're seeing that the business is really starting to pick up there. If you look specifically at welfare, it doesn't look like a lot was spent last year, because really not a lot was spent last year. There was so much federal money that came into the human services world to offset rental needs, heating oil needs, electricity needs. There was not a lot of demand on the town to fill that role that towns are otherwise obligated to fill. That went on for the last couple of years. However, this year I can tell you that our spending has gone right back up to where it was 3 or 4 years ago, before the pandemic happened. I don't see anything on the horizon that's going to change that. So I think we're going to start getting back up to those pre-pandemic levels. Also, our requests for public assistance have gone up in the last couple of years. In the last few years, you can see that our actual spending was, closer to that $30,000 range. That's where we're going to be, so we've decided to increase the budget accordingly. In previous years, we had spent out of that direct relief funds because we had excess at the end of the year. This time, we're not so certain that we're going to have that excess going forward, so we budgeted for that instead. In the assessing department, you'll see that we are making that purchase of the server, the new server, for the assessing software this year. Next year, we'll need to budget. Once we implement that software, we're going to be running 2 systems concurrently until we complete a revaluation. That is necessary when you're upgrading or changing from one software package to another. You really need to start fresh with a whole new revaluation. That's what we'll be doing, and you'll see that the services line has increased to account for that accordingly. We are also budgeting a little bit extra in the services line because we believe that Corcoran and Associates may need to be in the office a bit more to help with that conversion. There are some components of the assessing software that have to be implemented manually, from what we've been told, so there's some money in there for that. Patriotic services, cost of supplies are going up, and so that has gone up as well. And that concludes my section of the budget. Any questions?
Nicole, can you just discuss generally our staffing situation right now? We have a lot of vacancies. Are we in pretty good shape? Are there any major issues out there yet?
We are generally in good shape. We run into some seasonal issues every year at Recreation. It's becoming harder and harder to staff up there. So when Lisa comes in, she's going to have some suggestions in terms of increasing salaries that will help with that. It's getting harder and harder to find seasonal staff, particularly to run the children's programs in the summertime. So we really need to adjust wages there to attract those folk. Police department's perennial, where we always have an open position in PD, it seems now. I can't remember the last time we were fully staffed. It's been a while.
It was like a couple of weeks, wasn't there?
I think there was like a year and a half ago or so.
We were like, finally, it's done, and then
Yeah, no,
like a
then
week
someone
later,
left.
somebody left.
Yeah. And that is the case with PD, unfortunately. It's very tough to find good candidates. Chief Gennard will speak to this, I'm sure, but he'll put out a job posting, get some people interested, and then only have one person actually show up for testing.
They got it sometimes 40.
Yeah. And it's very unfortunate, it's very difficult to staff there. But once we do get staff in there, they do tend to stick around for a while. He's a very good chief. I think it's a very stable department. But we have had some openings there due to retirements. We're expecting a couple more coming up over the next few years. So one of the things you're going to see when we start talking about the police department budget, the fire department budget, and public works budget is we do have full-time positions budgeted in there that appear to be additional positions. That's essentially continuity planning. We know that there's some retirements coming up. We're going to bring some people in to help train, get comfortable in the position, and then the retirees will move on.
Is the recycling center fully staffed at this point?
They are fully staffed now. Yeah. Yeah, it took a while. Yeah.
No other questions for Nicole? Are we going to hear a finance presentation?
Yep.
Thank you.
Finance starts on page 8. The majority of spending is coming out of the finance budget because that's where all insurance lies. So that first general government section is covering all flavors of insurance: health, dental, workers' comp, disability, life, vision. The only places that you'll see it broken out is in the enterprise funds, where they are funding those items, and then it comes back to us as revenue, so that those positions, insurance products, are covered by fees and not taxes. So the biggest jump is the health insurance line. It's approximately $200,000. That is due to two things: 6.6% increases on premiums, and we are projecting for 6 new positions to be covered by health insurance. 3 of those are part-time positions that are on the docket for increasing to a full-time position in this budget before the end of the year. And 2 new positions, one in the planning and building department, and one in the PD. And then there is 1 vacant PD position. All of those positions I budgeted at family plans, so that if all 6 positions come in, we're not sitting unable to offer the position because of not having enough money in the insurance areas.
So it's very possible that we wouldn't actually expend that.
Correct.
Depending on whether the
Right.
plan is accepted.
Right, it could come in as low as a health buyout for a single person,
But it makes sense to budget.
which would be significantly less. So and the other thing that's also hard to know is who's planning on getting married this year. It's not something I can go out and ask everybody. Any changes to your health insurance coverage plan? So so all of the other items are budgeted at what the individual has currently for coverage. The property liability is in the next section. That covers all properties that are not paid for with fees. So that is not property liability for the wastewater treatment plant or any of our wells and that sort of thing, because those insurance costs are in those individual enterprise fund budgets. The services line is the cost of the trustees of the trust using a wealth manager to manage the trustees of the trust capital reserve and enterprise funds for the town. The human resources, we have, we're only funding for the costs of onboarding and advertising. Onboarding costs are the fees, $25 fee to the state police in order to run background checks, $15 fee to the federal listing that we do for background checks, and then everybody, and then a $15 fee to DMV for anybody that will be driving a vehicle. So those budgets will get smaller and smaller every year as the columns age out. Finance operations, there's no change to any staff other than the one thing that I would like to point out, that the auditor has dropped their price of the audit by several $1,000s because they are saving over a day of time over previous audits, and our bank accounts are now fully reconciled to the penny. The amount of adjusting.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you. But the adjusting journal entries that were done previous to me, according to Nicole, were 3 inches thick.
Binder.
I have received a few pages of journal entries and fought tooth and nail to not even honor some of them because the requests did not make any sense. So they are fully aware that we are on top of things, and there's time to be saved by them and money to be saved by us. So the tax collection area is our tax collector and deputy tax collector, and their salaries are also split out into water and sewer utility billing as well, because they are collecting and billing quarterly for water and sewer. The computer services is a new line that I've added to that because they have 2 products that they are using for billing. One is a tax and utility billing system that has been in place for a long time but was not being billed to tax collection, was being billed elsewhere. So I've pulled that and put it in where it goes, and part of that cost is also being shared with water sewer billing. The tax overlay, we have no agreements for paying any tax abatements going forward into the next year, so that is zeroed out. The reason you can see in the second column there for last fiscal year, almost $113,000 in the tax overlay, those are abatements paid out based off of people being coming in with concerns over their new values during the reval. So you can see what a reval does to a tax overlay budget. And then debt service, that is not the full cost of the debt we'll be paying for our general fund debt. because I still have tucked away $150,000 in bridge capital reserve and a $96,000 contribution from the 1853 that happened in July. So we will be using those monies fully in next year's bond payments, and then there will be no extra monies to be had for paying those bond payments. So that's why that dollar figure does not match your bond schedule on CIP. And that wraps it up. It's a 14.7% increase overall in all of those areas. I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, obviously, if you ask any question about the whole budget, it's all mine. And if you want, I'm happy to go over the revenues as well at this stage, because those are already derived as well. What's your pleasure?
I had a question about the health insurance.
Yes.
Now, general government, is that basically this building?
No,
So-
that's every single position in the entire town.
Oh, so fire, DPW?
Every single position, yep.
And
It's,
so,
that's a naming convention by the DRA.
fine, thank you. And then, so basically, roughly $200,000 is to be allocated, I think, after the 60, if you take out the 6%, maybe another close to 200,000 because of increased hiring and family plan.
Yes.
Roughly, what does a family plan cost the town these days? Do you have a number by any chance? Just curious.
$36,000.
So it comes out of the town.
Yes.
What about, how is the employee contributions to that?
20% of that.
So we pay 80% and the
Yes.
employee pays 20%.
Very generous.
Is that state law or is that negotiable?
That's in your employee handbook.
Any other questions? Does anybody want to hear a presentation on the revenue side? I see no concerns, so thank you, Ruben.
Revenue, yes, or?
No.
Okay. Can I just ask a question? Will we have an opportunity throughout the next several weeks if we do decide that we have revenue? I mean, we got this information within like the last 72 hours or so. So, I mean, I don't have any right now, but we will have an opportunity in future weeks, right?
They'll be at
I'm
every
here
meeting.
at every meeting.
Okay.
We want to do just an executive summary of revenue real quick, or what are we doing next? Do we still have other presentations right here?
But this is it for the night.
I do not have an executive summary of revenues. They are just a projection based off of the last 5 years of revenues and the expectations of what will come in the next year based off of whether it's building permits, sign permits, highway block grant money, or agreed upon items that we are already under agreement to receive, like the state aid grant for wastewater treatment plant. And monies that come in from charging New Hampshire ball bearings for their responsibility that's under contract for the landfill monitoring and that sort of thing. So it's all over the map, and it would be kind of a line-by-line segment.
But
Plus,
fair to say,
all the revenues are going to be brought up in each individual budget anyways.
they can be if you like.
Well, I mean, isn't that going to be part of anybody's presentation, that there's revenues?
More in some than others,
Right.
yeah. I mean, certainly, when we get to recreation, one of the things Lisa wants to talk about is increasing the fees that they're charging on some of their services. So that'll be a discussion.
Any of the presentations that have already been made may generate new questions as we proceed. And if you would let us know before the next meeting, whatever meeting is the next one, that you would like to have somebody from the town come back in. They're usually very responsive, and if necessary, we might delay that for an extra week. But we can always go back and ask new questions.
And also, please note that there's a lot of slack in the schedule, so if you want to have someone come back later on in the budget, in the process, after you've already heard from other departments, we can do that as well.
I would personally benefit if we included a discussion of revenues along with the rest of the budget.
Happy to.
That would be good.
I think in other budgets, it makes a lot more sense to talk about them. And my budget and Lily's budget, there's really, only one significant source of revenue, and that's taxation. So that's not really.
Mine
Spending
is,
a lot.
the majority for the finance is charging water, sewer, ambulance for their share of health insurance so that it offsets and taxes aren't raised and appropriated for health insurance costs of employees in those fee centers as opposed to general fund.
Ronnie?
Our next meeting is the 10th at what time?
5:30.
5:30.
Everything's 5:30 now.
Did we
Not
decide
everybody heard
that?
that discussion, but we decided that if the select board is fast, they can always finish at 5:30, and so we can always start at 5:30.
So, are the select board meetings always at 5? I thought they were at 7.
No, 5.
Why was the last one at 7? It's fine, I'm just curious, I just trying to. Oh,
Wasn't.
there was one at 7. Okay,
Maybe it was a planning board or zoning board meeting?
I don't know. Okay, that's fine.
Select board's always at 5, though.
Okay. I like the idea of a little after 5 so people who work outside of town can get here. So.
Well, the important meeting is the budget meeting, that'll be 5:30.
Can I just go back to the earlier discussion about necessity of budget committee? Tyler raised an interesting point. Nicole, can you speak generally to like how much extra preparation is involved in doing these presentations for your group? Above and beyond what they normally have to do?
They certainly do spend time. The directors spend a lot of time preparing for their presentations. I know that Seth, for instance, is already preparing for next week's presentation. He's going to put probably a few hours into it every day through the end of this week, making sure that he's got a solid presentation ready to go. It really depends on the director. Chief Gennard, for instance, I think he probably had his presentation ready to go in August. He's
Update a few numbers?
just, exactly, plug in some new things. It really depends on the director. The work that I put in, is to meet with each of the directors, where we spend about an hour or so going through, their original presentation to me. And then we might go back and forth a bit, refine some numbers, and then I drive Lily crazy for about 2 weeks after we've got the whole thing together, answering my questions, really starting to drill down. She puts together, the actual spreadsheets for you. So, if anyone's putting time into it, it's Lily and Tanya, really putting a lot of effort into getting these together, proofing all these numbers, making sure that everything is accurate. So a lot of time goes into it, but it's not necessarily that we wouldn't be doing it. It is obviously a fair amount of that is work we would have to be doing otherwise. I think that the question that Tyler's really, getting to, if I can read Tyler's mind a little bit, is, is there, does the budget committee really feel like they're getting what they want out of this process? Are the questions really being answered? Are the questions of the community being answered through this process?
I think that's mainly what we're trying to do, is be representatives of the community. That's what our main function is. But certainly, it's worth examining if we can streamline or... Go ahead, Tyler.
But I should add that if this was just a presentation without a budget committee up here, no one would pay any attention. But the questions we heard tonight were great questions, and they clarified a lot of things, and they added to the presentation. So there is that vitality to the budget committee. I think my point was that it hasn't changed numbers drastically in the past, but it certainly gets you and your families involved, right? And then the people you know, so it gets people involved.
My wife's not watching the TV right now.
My personal opinion of this process is that it's needed. It is absolutely mandatory part of the public process so that everybody has an opportunity to either view it here or know that you all are asking the hard questions, looking at it more in detail. Not everybody feels that they have the time to dedicate to looking and reviewing at a $22 million spending budget overall between all of the different funds, all of the different capital reserve spending. We're talking about a significant amount of cash and I've never seen budget committees, and I've been doing this a very long time, dramatically push the number, at least under me, but that's also because what I'm presenting, I'm anticipating that we want to present exactly what we predict is needed, not having some wild amount of extra, as some states like to call it,
Free cash?
Free cash, I
Free
believe.
cash?
Yes. That seems wild. So the work that I've been doing since working on this budget document in early September is making sure that every single item has been reviewed for 5 years of history or current staffing and what their benefits are at the rate of pay. It's really, I think it's incredibly important for the public to know that there are individuals that are really committing themselves to looking at it more in depth.
I don't know about you guys, but I've had at least one person ask me about whatever their issue is, about like, make sure you take care of this. Like you know, you're having a problem with the road, and you're like, what about
Well,
my road?
I was
You know?
interested in what the effect the capital reserve fund has on the schedule. That was my question, really. Maybe I didn't pose it properly.
No, I just think everybody cares about something, is all
But
I'm
in
saying.
some ways, this is kind of a dress rehearsal because ultimately the legislature is going to have to approve this budget.
And I certainly don't want to do it in a vacuum. It is taxpayer funds. These are fees that are being assessed to our residents, fees that are being assessed to patients. I want to make sure that, you know, a lot of eyes get on this. I can't do this in a vacuum. It's a lot, you know, as Lily said, it's a $22 million budget. That's a lot to put, you know, into the hands of a very small staff. We want to make sure that everyone's questions are answered, that everyone feels comfortable, or at least understands what all this is going to, and you'll all be supportive of us when we go to town meeting.
And I might add, I think you've all not said this in some form, that the rigor of doing this in a public forum probably helps all the players. Because if you have to justify this in front of a town meeting, you've at least done it once. And it feels better, so you're not reaching for numbers or thinking about what you didn't say or feeling uncomfortable with it. You're going to feel more comfortable.
Absolutely.
I know that's a sort of psychological issue, but one thing that I look for, and I don't, I only represent myself in this case, is the effect on tax rate. And so I want to be able to explain to people who may come to me that this is the reason why you have the tax rate you have. And it's been gone over very thoroughly. I have confidence in it, or I don't have confidence in it, but I fought for it one way or another, if I could. I'd like to be more activist. I'd like our board to be fairly activist in looking at how the numbers affect the tax rate, even if there's austerity called for in some cases. Yes, we tried that, it didn't work, or we asked about it. And I think that will be part of the process. We haven't seen much of it now, but with increasing taxes, with the expectation of increasing costs, thereby increasing taxes, you're probably going to have to explain a little bit more. Somebody is somewhere along the way. So you'll be more or less practiced.
Marion?
The process that Peterborough uses with the select board, the CIP, and the budget committee, how common is this process, this type of process, in other New Hampshire towns?
Very common in small towns. In your larger communities, you may have a council manager form of government, in which case it's the town council that is putting it together, maybe with, maybe without a budget committee along with them. So it really depends on your community. But I think by and large, this is the process for most of the smaller communities, the under 10 or 15,000 population.
I don't know how common it is, but there's an option to have a budget committee that actually has authority. But
I was gonna bring that up.
nobody here is floating that
To go in the opposite
concept.
direction.
No, and that's,
Pay?
We like this happening, right?
Hey, control the budget.
With authority comes work.
that is very
Well,
true.
they've been working on it since September. Do you think if we were the ones that doing it, we'd have the time to,
Yeah, exactly, that's.
along with your regular jobs and everything else?
That's what we pay them for.
I see no more raised hands. Oh, sorry, Ronnie.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
In favor? Aye. Opposed? Vote from home, please.
Thank you.
Right. That's, I think that's the wrong way to go. We're not the next Yeah, that's why we hired them. That's their job.